Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. So one thing you may have learned about me is that I'm really interested in understanding the different lunar mansion systems and researching and looking into and trying to reconstruct or help reconstruct this part of astrology that has not been given a whole lot of attention. And primarily we work with it here through the magical context, but you can't really do that without looking into and digging into the history and development and use of a system. And as with many things in life, there are certain parts of Lunar Mansion sort of lore that are controversial. One of which is, how do you divide up the lunar mansions? What is the lunar mansion boundary system? And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I'm not here to kind of like litigate or argue for a particular style of division, even though I strongly feel that the equal tropical version is the best one, the most accurate one. What I'm really more here talking about is how, like, the lunar mansion boundaries and how they're probably going to be the death of me, likely through some sort of aneurysm, but also to address an error that I've made in the past and one that I've seen other people make or argue for, as I now have new information and a better perspective on this than I did back when I first started talking about it. So, lunar mansion boundaries, what are they? Why do we have them? The lunar mansions are a division of the sky based on the average motion of the moon around the Earth, and different systems have done this slightly different ways. The Arabic and the Chinese systems have 28 mansions. The Indian Jyotish Nakshatra system has 27 mansions. So there's just a little bit of differences there. But beyond that, there are further differences about like where these start and how these work. Most common in the Western system that the Arabic system kind of melded onto is a tropical division, which begins at 0 degrees Aries for the beginning of the first lunar mansion and extends out equally to about 12 degrees 56 minutes and I think like 12 degrees 51 minutes and I think like 26 seconds of arc. And that's sort of the more commonly used one in Western astrologies. It's the one that we see listed in the Picatrix. It's the one that we see listed in Al-Biruni's work, both from like the 8th, 9th centuries. And that's that one. We have another one which focuses on precessing the lunar mansions, and that also tends to be equal. So by that I mean the tropical version, which has it stuck to the solstices and the equinoxes, says the lunar mansions begin at 0 degrees Aries. But a precessed system says that now the difference in these, it tries to keep up with the constellations, with the asterisms that the lunar mansions are associated with. And so it says that instead of beginning at 0 degrees Aries, we begin now at like 24 and some odd minutes of Aries. So now the first lunar mansion begins at 24 degrees Aries and not 0 degrees Aries, and they're all equal, 12 degrees, 51 minutes, 26 seconds from there. And that tends to be more popular as we move into like Renaissance era works into the modern day. You'll have people arguing for it then. We have a sidereal system, which is more focused on which is what the nakshatras are based on. That's a little bit different and is more part and parcel to the Jyotish astrology, which has used the sidereal zodiac basically for its entirety. And sidereal divisions of lunar mansions, especially within like the context of the nakshatra system, tends to be 27 mansions, but also equally spaced. So they're equal divisions of 27. And then finally, we have kind of a constellational version where the lunar mansions are all different sizes to keep up with the varying sizes of the asterisms that the mansions are based on. And this is something that is more commonly found in the Chinese system, the Ershibashu, which focuses on sort of those uneven divisions, kind of keeping up with the stars and constellations. Famously, there's a lunar mansion in that system that is only like 1 degree long. So, you know, good luck hitting that bullseye if you're aiming for it. And so it just works that way. So those are sort of our 4 different boundary systems with lunar mansions. Equal tropical beginning at 0 degrees Aries, equal precessed beginning at around 24 degrees Aries, sidereal, which would start at 0 degrees Aries in the sidereal zodiac, which we would say is like 6 degrees Pisces in the tropical zodiac, and then a constellational unequal, where they begin and end unevenly in reference to different fixed stars and asterisms. Those are our 4 systems. In Western astrology, we see most commonly a tropical equal division that begins at 0 degrees Aries. Like I said before, this is the method that the Picatrix describes into us. This is the method that Al-Biruni describes into us, and it's a pretty common method. Around the time of the Renaissance, we start to see more works that are trying to do a precessed version, kind of moving the stars around in relationship to how far the stars have shifted from 0 degrees Aries to that current time. And these usually tend to be equal. And we don't see much in the way of like a constellational division of the zodiac until we get into William Ramsay, who wrote in 1653. And this was something that kind of came to my attention through social media a few years ago. And I tried going back to finding the original post. It's not there anymore. Likely the Twitter user who first brought it up and started to talk about it has since left that platform and deleted their stuff with it, which is a shame, but I get it. I've done it. I did it too. But the argument was that William Ramsay's, in his 1653 Astrology Restored, listed out a table of lunar mansions that was unequal in size and was precessed. And so the argument that was being made was that this was like a precessed constellational framework of lunar mansions. And this would be very unique if true. When I went and I looked at the table, I agreed with the assessment. It seemed very clear that that was what Ramsay was doing based on my initial assessment of it. There is a lunar mansion that is about 3 degrees wide, for instance. There's a lunar mansion that's like almost 30 degrees wide and something like that. And while there is an obvious error in the table with the 28th lunar mansion beginning at 24 degrees Aries, but the first lunar mansion beginning at 20 degrees Aries, it seems very clear that these mansions are different. They're differently sized. Even other mansions are off by a bit. And so that's how I interpreted it. That's how I took it. I started writing it, and I wrote an article where I included this and talked about how it seems like William Ramsay in 1653 was using a constellational version of lunar mansions, and that's very weird, very unique to the time. But recently I reconsidered my stance, and I no longer think that that is true. While researching something else on a related topic, I looked through Claudius Dario's A Brief and Most Easy Introduction to the Judgment of the Stars. And in this section, in this book, which is sort of like a prototype, in my opinion, of William Woolley's Christian astrology, he has a section, a little appendix at the end where he talks about medical astrology, and in that he includes his own table of the lunar mansions, and I'll put that on screen. What drew my eye about this is it is an example of a precessed version of the lunar mansions, a precessed version of the lunar mansions where the lunar mansions are all equal in size. And I thought that was really interesting because it was sort of one of the earliest indications of lunar mansions being precessed that I can remember. I would need to go back and kind of do further research to see who the earliest author was that did this and advocated for this approach. I'm not sure who that is at this point in time. In a way, you can tell that the lunar mansions are evenly distributed in size, aside from like going through and trying to do the math on it, is looking and seeing how and where similar mansions in the system are placed. So what I mean by that is, in a system where there are 28 lunar mansions evenly distributed, you will have 7 lunar mansions for 1/4 of the zodiac. And I'll go ahead and I'll put a representation, like a graphic explaining that on screen. But you can see through this that the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th lunar mansions all fit between 0 degrees Aries, which is when the 1st lunar mansion begins, to 0 degrees Cancer, which is when the 8th lunar mansion begins. And then so forth and so on throughout the rest of the zodiac, where you have lunar mansions 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, fitting between Cancer and Libra, and all the way around. So what this means is that the 1st lunar mansion and the 8th lunar mansion, in a system where the lunar mansions have an equal division, will have the same starting degree, just in a different sign of the zodiac. So in a tropical division, where we start the lunar mansions at 0 degrees Aries, the 1st lunar mansion starts at 0 degrees Aries, and the 8th lunar mansion will start at 0 degrees Cancer. The 15th lunar mansion will start at 0 degrees Libra, and the 22nd will start at 0 degrees Capricorn. So that similarity, that pattern, then continues on to the next set, where the 2nd lunar mansion, the 9th lunar mansion, the 16th lunar mansion, and the 23rd lunar mansion will then begin at 12 degrees of a cardinal sign, for instance. And so that's what happens with Dario's table, but it happens with the precessed degree. So for instance, going back to Dario's lunar mansion table here, we can see that the 1st, 8th, and 15th lunar mansions all begin at 19 degrees and 26 minutes of the cardinal signs. The 22nd lunar mansion is listed at 19 degrees and 16 minutes, which seems like a pretty obvious error in my opinion, unless there's some reason why the 22nd lunar mansion should suddenly be 10 minutes shorter than any of the others. It seems pretty obvious that this is some sort of error, especially since the pattern continues continues with all the other lunar mansions that are in that sort of set in that place in their quadrant set. So the 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd mansions all begin at 2 degrees and 17 minutes of the fixed signs. The 3rd, 10th, 17th, and 24th mansion begin at 15 degrees and 9 minutes of the fixed signs, and so on and so forth. So running across Dario's table of a precessed equal division of the lunar mansions brought back to mind, to me, William Ramsay's divisions, because I hadn't really thought about William Ramsay's lunar mansions in several years since I kind of initially went through looking at it. I hadn't really thought about it. So I went back and I compared it to William Ramsay's, and I was a little confused. Not confused. It just kind of like sparked interest in me, because looking at it, I could see that I think William Ramsay is doing the same thing, but there are a lot more errors in his table than the obvious one with the 28th and 27th lunar mansions. So popping up William Ramsay's table of lunar mansions on the screen, we can see that the degrees are a little bit different than they were in Dario's, and the reason is because 55 years have passed between Dario's publication of his work in 1598 till Ramsay's publication in 1653, and that's what's happened. Ramsay has precessed the lunar mansions to begin at the position where they were in his time. It's a roughly 40-minute forward motion for each of the degrees. So you can see pretty clearly that there is evidence, in my opinion, that this table is supposed to be very similar to Dario's. And by that I mean, if you look at the middle row, the 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th lunar mansions all begin at 28 degrees and 40 minutes of their signs. And that seems very suspicious to me if this system is trying to be an updated constellational unequal division of lunar mansions. That seems like very, very convenient. What are the likelihood that those lunar mansions are all going to start at the same degrees? But if we approach this as a division that is meant to be equal with a lot of errors in it, it makes a lot of sense. We see the same thing happen with the second from the bottom row, with the 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th lunar mansions all beginning at 24 degrees and 23 minutes of the mutable signs, which again, it would be pretty convenient, pretty odd. So what about these mansions that are different? What about these mansions that appear to be different sizes? The 2nd and 16th mansion start at 2 degrees and 57 minutes, but the 9th mansion is at 5 degrees and 57 minutes. Well, to me it seems pretty clear that 5 was a typographical error, and we meant to have 2 degrees here, because it seems odd that this mansion would be exactly 3 degrees shorter to the minute, also ending in 57 minutes, than the others in this set. That seems very strange to me. The 23rd lunar mansion in this line, which begins at 2 degrees of a fixed sign in 56 minutes, is probably just a rounding thing. Like I said, the lunar mansions are not... This only discusses lunar mansions in degrees and minutes, but the lunar mansions also have an arc second associated with them. They're 12 degrees, 51 minutes, and I think 27 arc seconds long. So I think it's just kind of a rounding thing here to bring it more in line, and that's why that one is different. The 24th lunar mansion here is written as part of the line that's supposed to begin at 15 degrees and 49 minutes of their signs, and it seems pretty suspicious that this begins at 25 degrees and 49 minutes, so all but one of those digits is correct, and the 2 is supposed to be a 1 to bring it more equal. And then I'm not sure what's going on with the bottom one, with the bottom row here. It's a little all over the place, to where the correct beginning point for these mansions is supposed to be 7 degrees and 15 minutes, which is we see in the 14th lunar mansion. But the 7th lunar mansion is written at 7 degrees and 5 minutes. The 0 is probably supposed to be a 1. The 21st is written as 7 degrees and 25 minutes. The 2 is probably supposed to be a 1. And the 28th lunar mansion is the one that has the most obvious error in it, where it says it begins at 24 degrees of Aries, which is only 4 degrees past the first lunar mansion. So there's obviously something that has gone wrong with the numbers, with the typography of this mansion, where it should be 7 degrees of Aries and 15 minutes instead of 24 degrees. So that's what I've been dealing with, is coming to the realization that this table handed to us down by William Ramsay in 1653 is not a sort of unique spin on the lunar mansions as unequal constellational divisions, but it's just a table that is filled with numerical errors that has given that impression. And I went back, and initially I was looking at the 2004 re-editing, retyping version by Kim Farnell, and I was curious if these were errors that were made through that editing process that just never got caught, or if these were errors or in the original. And while I don't have like an original copy of William Ramsey's, I was able to hunt down through the help of a friend an OCR'd version where these errors are in that version as well. So it seems like something was going wrong either through how I don't know, either how William Ramsey wrote it down maybe incorrectly, or there was some sort of typographical error in reprints, or the OCR was incorrect, or something. So there seems to be some core issue with the information being wrong in this. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this was, one, I needed to correct this. This is a mistake on my part, on my reading of this, and being able to talk about it and lay it out why I think it's a mistake and why I think William Ramsey was continuing to use that kind of precessed version of the lunar mansions handed down potentially by Dario to then be equalized lunar mansions instead of this weird kind of constellational version. Because William Ramsey is the only example that we have, allegedly, of a constellational division of the Western Arabic lunar mansions. So it seems to me that we're keeping this version of the lunar mansions where they're equally distributed in size, but trying to find where these lunar mansions begin, either through keeping them in line with 0 degrees Aries with the tropical zodiac, as was more popular in the Arabic tradition, or kind of updating that to keep along with precession, like we saw kind of start to begin in the Renaissance era of astrology. So hopefully you understand why lunar mansion boundaries are probably going to be the thing that kills me, the stress related from that. But I hope that this gives you pause to really think about and dig into information that you see about some of these more esoteric topics, whether that's information that you get from me. Please question it. Please push back on it. Don't take it at face value. I make mistakes, obviously, just like I did with this. Or if it's with other information about the lunar mansions that you read, there's a lot of myths out there, a lot of misunderstandings, and a lot of ways people twist things to try to make them fit in a certain viewpoint. I am, of course, guilty of this myself, but I'll also be one of the first people to be like, hey, I got this wrong, let's talk about it, and go into like a strangely long diatribe about a very specific thing. So hopefully it's given you kind of that reaction to information about lunar mansions, but also about astrology in general. Be skeptical, take it with a grain of salt, double check, triple check, because otherwise you might end up writing a section of an article about lunar mansions that is just entirely wrong, like I did. So hopefully this video helps correct some of those misunderstandings, some of those mistakes that I made, and helps give more life to the conversation of the development and transmission of lunar mansions. But thank you all so much for listening to me make up for my mistake, and I will see you guys next time.